Hey everybody, Éric Grenier here, and welcome to this new episode of The Numbers. I'm joined, as always, with my friend Philippe J. Fournier. Philippe, how you doing today? It's fall.
It's welcome to the equinox. This is the best season in Canada, according to me. I think
I like the fall too, yeah.
the fall is the best because the awfulness of summer is over, and we're not yet into the ice age of winter. I like fall a lot. Hockey starts, the NHL starts, even though my team is going to be awful this year. But yeah, I'm happy. So we are at the equinox is today, so that means that the days and nights are exactly the same time. And then starting from tomorrow, it's going to be longer nights than days. So, and again, I like this. I'm more of a night owl anyway. So,
Okay, that kind of sounds depressing, actually, but anyway, the night is longer than the day.
well,
Yeah. Well, it sounds like we're already talking about the Liberals. So why don't we get into that?
Transition time. All right.
That's a good segue. Yeah, we'll start with the federal scene. There hasn't been as many polls out over the last little while. I did find interesting because I think last week we discussed the difference between the Nanos polling and the polling we saw from some of the other firms. And Nanos is starting, it seems, to move in that direction again. The numbers they put out this week, and they weren't paywalled, did have the Conservatives ahead by 6 points. So, like, in the last 2 weeks, it's more or less grown by 6 points, that gap between the two parties. But I actually found what was more interesting, because the Conservatives bounced back and forth always in the polling, was that Polliver had moved 6 points ahead of Trudeau on best prime minister.
Yes.
And that was the score that, regardless of whether the Conservatives were ahead by 9 or if it was a close race, it was usually a close race between Polliver and Trudeau. But this is the first indication we get from Nanos, which is a trailing poll because it goes for 4 weeks back.
Yep.
That Polliver has this kind of lead over Trudeau. And I think that's something to keep an eye on going forward.
And I think it says more about the prime minister than it does about Poilievre. I mean, it does. Poilievre is growing in notoriety. Of course, he's getting more known from the Canadian electorate. But I mean, Trudeau's personal numbers are beginning to be an anchor on the Liberal brand. Is that possible? I mean, he was their best asset for a long time, but we see, I think, for the first time since perhaps the height of SNC-Lavalin, that Trudeau's personal numbers are lower than the Liberals. And so that can be interesting for the next 2 years. And how long will Liberal MPs and Liberal strategists hold on to that? I mean, it's going to be fascinating if those numbers do not change over the next few weeks or months.
You mentioned notoriety, and there was a poll that I put on my site. Polliver had offered it to me to go up. And I just loved this poll because what Polliver did was they actually just asked people to put in the names of the leader of the Conservatives and the Liberal cabinet. So it wasn't like, here's Pierre Poilievre, do you know who this is? It was, who is the leader of the Conservative Party? And you had to write it in. And what I thought was really funny about it is that Polliver provided me all the responses.
They did, huh?
Yes. So I got all the ones that were right and wrong. And so you could see all the ones that people put in. And Poilievre's name seems to be the hardest name to spell. There were so many spelling mistakes on it, which I understand. It's a French name, and people pronounce it differently, right? You hear Polliver, you hear Pollievre, you hear Poilievre, you hear a little bit more of a French twang to it sometimes. My favorite one was that someone put in Power Polliver, which I thought was really funny. And it was also an indication of how difficult I find a lot of English Canadians must have in spelling French names, because some of them were way out there. Like, they didn't even look like real French names from what I saw. So I thought that was funny. But 57% of Canadians, before the convention, were able to put in a name that was similar to Pierre Poilievre, who indicated at least that they knew who he was. There's a way, like, Polliver put that it was only 57%. I thought that was higher than I thought it was going to be.
Really, huh? Well, it's still, I mean, he's been a prominent MP and then the leader of the opposition for one full year, including many, I think, media appearances everywhere. 57%, you say, it would be high in your opinion? I think I think that means that 43% don't know or can't name who he is. I know a third of the electorate doesn't vote at all, so these people are disengaged. But he's not just some backbencher or shadowy cabinet minister. He's the leader of the opposition. He's the politician that's made the most noise in Canadian politics in the past year. I don't know. I found it was low a bit. No.
I mean, it's low from a civics point of view. I don't find it low from my expectations because I think that a lot of people do not pay that much attention to politics, particularly when you're talking about an opposition leader. Like if this was done a week before the campaign and he was only at 57%, that would be a problem. But or a week before voting day. But I didn't think it was that low. What I thought was actually really quite bad from a civics point of view is that Polliver also asked, can you name any cabinet ministers? So how they did this, they said, how many cabinet ministers can you name? So people could say none, 1, 2, or 3 or more. And depending on what they said, then Polliver gave them that many slots to fill in. Some people said that they could name some and then got it wrong. They named people who were wrong or that weren't actually cabinet ministers. But 40% were able to name 1. But then it got really tough after that. 26% could name 2, and only 14% could name at least 3. So if any of these cabinet ministers are thinking, one, that they have a lot of personal appeal and people can win on their own and become leader of the party, most people have no idea who they are. 7% named Anita Anand, and she was third on the list. It was Joly had 15% and Freeland had 30%. It just shows that below the prime minister level or the party leader level, a lot of these people are unknowns.
I mean, do we say that these people are idiots or that we're huge nerds? I mean, I think we go with the nerd option, right? I mean,
somewhere in between.
But 60% of people could not name a single cabinet minister. I mean, Christopher Freeland, she's been everywhere. Renegotiated NAFTA, Minister of Finance, Deputy Prime Minister. I was shocked by this. I know that you and I and people who listen to this podcast will follow politics more than the average Joe. But 60% not able to correctly name a single cabinet minister, I think was shocking. But if I may, Éric, I would like just to go back to the Poilievre question. People who could correctly identify the name of the leader of this opposition and conservative leader. It was when you break it down by party. Also was surprising. So 72% of conservative voters could name Pierre Poilievre, which you could say, okay, that's pretty high. That's almost 3/4. Some people, will vote conservative or vote for their preferred party, regardless of who is leader. So perhaps they don't know the leader name. Among liberal voters, 66%, so fairly similar. Among NDP voters, 37% could name the conservative leader. And yet he is trying to eat your lunch for the past year since he became leader, trying to court your voters. I thought that was fascinating. Barely a third of NDP voters could name the leader of the Conservative Party.
I think that's a reflection of two things. One being the NDP's voter base is younger, and younger people knew Poilievre less than the others. But it's also an indication that there is some reason for the NDP to be worried about that, right? Because that means that 60%, 63% of their base is not that familiar with Pollievre. Now, they might get a look at him and be like, yeah, no thanks. But it also means that a lot of them might be like, oh, that's who it is? He seems okay. Like, that seems like a bit of a risk, right? Because the Liberal base knows who he is and doesn't like him because they're not voting for him. Yeah. But the NDP base doesn't really know. So there is that chance there for the Conservatives to get in on that vote.
And I know that I'm going to say something that will anger some NDP voters, but I remember speaking to prominent NDP people and they said that, well, in general, NDP voters are more sophisticated in Canadian politics than the average voters. And maybe for some of it was true when you talk about some academics. But then I'm looking at this poll like, okay, Poilievre's been leader for 1 full year. And he's been all over social media, all over the news. It was surprising. So,
well, if anybody claims their voters are better than the other voters, I think
more sophisticated.
I think that's a dangerous path. Yeah. I mean, I understand the argument, right? Because if you got the two big parties, and for a lot of people, it's just you choose between those two. So if you're voting for one of the other parties, you must be a little bit more in tune with politics. But I don't know. I mean, it depends on where you're from, right? If you're from the BC interior, voting Liberal would be the sophisticated, I guess, view because no one votes for them there, right? So, anyway, I think it's code word for
It's snob.
It's a code word for trying to explain why they're not doing as well as other parties.
Well, you don't understand. We're more anyway. 4% did name the environment minister, Stephen Guilbeault.
A lot more in Quebec too.
A lot more, but 10% in Quebec could name Stephen Guilbeault. I remember.
Still not that much, I guess.
It's still not that much. And in Quebec, if you look at the numbers, 51% of Quebec respondents could name at least one cabinet minister. That's the highest proportion in the country. But when you look at the names that were named, outside of Miss Freeland, it was Joly, Guilbeault, Champagne, Rodriguez, Duclos, all Quebecers, and then 3% for Anand and 3% for Leblanc. Which I think in the report it says some people call him Romeo Leblanc, which I thought was kind of funny. But almost there. So very interesting.
It was interesting how at the regional level, some, with the exception of Quebec, the regional ministers did not actually have high scores. Right?
Absolutely.
In BC, the highest BC minister, I think, was Harjit Sajjan, and I think he had 5%.
Yeah, 5%.
He had Randy Boissonneau in Alberta, I think, who did 3%.
3%.
Dan Vandal, who is the only prime minister in Manitoba, managed 1% in the prairies. It just shows that it is really hard to get known. And I was listening to a podcast, and I can't remember who it was. I think it was Stephanie Levitz who might have said it. Or no, sorry. It was Althea Raj on At Issue Panel.
Right.
And she said that she had heard from some Liberal MPs that, you know, if they were elected in 2019 or 2021, they didn't know their election to Justin Trudeau. Like, if they think that they won on their own charm and charisma, they are going to get very disappointed in another election, because the vast majority of people vote for party and leader, and that's it. And it's nice that you think that you're well known within your riding. Some of you might be if you're listening. I'm not trying to attack you, but do not believe that you can only win on your own. If you ran as an independent, the vast majority of MPs would lose
and get crushed, basically.
Crushed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, just a little bit of a check on anybody's, you know, humility. I think this poll was. I think it was useful for that.
Something that Dan Arnold, the CEO of Polliver, told me is also, again, I mean, when we see polls that ask impressions, positive impressions and negative impressions of politicians, if you go outside the leaders and maybe the Minister of Finance, people will answer basically just based on reputation, on maybe they heard something, because again, the vast majority of voters never heard of these people.
And Dan Arnold, once he came on my old podcast with the CBC, he had said, and I think he said this on the podcast, I don't know, because all those episodes disappeared.
What a shame.
The way it works at the CBC, podcasts don't last forever, I guess. But he had mentioned that in a lot of his polling, he would ask people's approval rating of the Treaty of Algernon. Do you know what that is, Philippe?
I don't know.
No?
What is it? Treaty of what?
Algernon. It's a treaty from Star Trek.
Oh my God! I don't watch Star Trek. That's why. Oh my God, that's funny.
Okay.
That's
yeah. So anyway, but he would get people who would give their opinion on it.
Yeah.
Maybe they were Trekkies, but I think more likely it shows how people will respond to anything, right?
Oh, I love this though. That's really funny. Good going.
Because it's a baseline. Because if you can get 14% to say that they're aware of the Treaty of Algernon, I mean, again, maybe they're Trekkies, but it shows that if you're scoring anywhere below 14%, if that's what the poll showed, it shows that people are just saying they know about it, or they know who you are and they actually have no clue. So anyway,
I had a pollster told me that in some poll, just to try it out, they offered the chocolate cake party, and the chocolate cake party did have some support in the poll. But again,
that sounds good. I'd like to vote for a chocolate. And just to clarify, Dan Arnold used to be the chief pollster for the Liberals, and he is, I believe, the chief strategy officer. I don't think he's not the CEO of Polliver.
Oh, he's not. Okay, I thought he was.
No,
Sorry about that.
Just to clarify that. Let's talk about two other federal issues. First, the big one, I think, is the news from this week about the announcement of, and we don't really have any numbers really to go on this, but it is a thing I think we have to talk about, is that the announcement on Monday when Justin Trudeau said in the House that the government had intelligence that it was the Indian government who was behind the assassination of a Canadian in Canada. And there's been a lot of fallout from this. And I don't know, do you have any thoughts about what this could mean. Now we're not going to talk about foreign policy. We're not those kinds of experts.
No.
But you know, you don't want to get too cynical about what is in effect an assassination and a murder. But what kind of impact do you think this will have on voting? Not just voting intentions, but just public opinion. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think the biggest impact, if we don't want to reduce, this is a terrible story, right? But if we reduce it to the political side for a second, this is an issue that should not, in theory, be a partisan issue. And
Right.
so will the party leaders, Blanchet, Poilievre, Singh, and all of them, will they be able to set politics aside and talk in a united front about this? I think we had some indication of this week, although there was a scrum by Poilievre who wasn't too, you know, I think he doesn't change gears very often. He's been so focused on attacking Trudeau for absolutely everything and anything that to be able to just take a second and think, okay, we have to speak as Canadians on this and let's not play politics with an assassination like this. I think that's the test. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that is. And on Monday, I thought it was good. Everybody stood in the house and said all the same kind of things. On Tuesday, I did not think it was very good. When Poilievre came out and said what he had said that the Prime Minister should come clean. He said that Canadians should see all the evidence. And he brought up how it was interesting to him how Trudeau had acted on China, but not on India. Those, to me, were all very... I thought they were unhelpful, not from a partisan point of view, but from this is a super delicate situation.
Yeah.
And to raise the specter that the Prime Minister is hiding things deliberately, coming clean, I thought that was a real misstep for him, because he is right now being looked at as a Prime Minister in waiting.
Yeah.
And this was a moment to be prime ministerial, not to be partisan, right? And to say also just the idea that Canadians need to see the evidence. I mean, this is a murder trial, in effect. We don't put crime to public opinion. It's for judges and juries, and and so I thought it was I mean, there are lots of considerations here. Narendra Modi, the leader of India, is seen as a conservative. He's part of the IDU, which is the international group of conservative parties. And so my concern is that there is a reflex here to say, well, he's on our side, and so he has to be defended. And to me, I thought it was you want to see on this kind of thing, when it's come to really delicate foreign policy issues, you do want to see that nonpartisanship. And I thought that fell apart pretty quickly, and I thought that was disappointing.
Also, I mean, it's what CSIS discovers. I mean, should everything be public? I mean, transparency is good usually, but there's a reason we have CSIS. So yeah, we'll see about that. But I think that the Liberals got burned by the China story, where they didn't get in front of it. The report said that basically the Globe and Mail had already hints of the story and were working on it. It wasn't going to come out eventually. So does that make Trudeau right or wrong in having said it publicly? I can't be the judge of that, but at least it's good to inform the House so that they can take a course of action that will not be seen as partisan, especially in a minority government, right? Whatever happens next has to get some agreement from the opposition parties. So it's a messy situation, and I'm not very comfortable discussing this because, again, I did one class in foreign policy, and I thought I discovered how complicated it was, and yet I don't know anything. So, but anyway, yeah, it's gonna be a story for the next session for sure. And it's going to be added up to the interference commission in the next months for sure.
And just from a kind of political point of view, it does displace a little bit of some of the other conversations, right, about housing, about inflation, and so that is going to have an impact over the coming weeks and months. And then there's the whole aspect of diaspora politics and how that is going to play out, and that we really don't have any clue just yet, right? So this will be a one to follow. One last thing on federal politics. The center-ice Canadians, center-ice conservatives, they changed their name a little bit.
Yeah.
Finally came out this week and said they're starting a new party. I thought the name was funny because it made me think of a party close to your neck of the woods.
Wait. Did they announce the name? I thought it was Center
They
Ice.
did.
Well, it's not Center Ice?
because that would be a ridiculous name.
Well,
No,
Le Centre
the
de
name-
l'Atlas? Yeah, okay. What is it?
No, the name of the party is the Canadian Future Party. Avenir
God.
Canadien.
Oh, God.
A little bit like the CAC. Anyway. So this is Dominic Cardy is going to be the interim leader. So he is his political voyage is kind of interesting. He started out as the leader of the NDP in New Brunswick. He eventually crossed the floor.
Yeah.
Not literally, because he didn't have a seat, but he ran for the PCs. He was a minister. He had a disagreement with Higgs. He was booted from the PC caucus. He's sitting as an independent in New Brunswick, and now is going to be the front of this party, this Canadian Future Party, which is trying to be a centrist option. It also has people like Rick Peterson, who is a former Conservative leadership candidate, involved in it. I don't know. What do you think about this new venture?
If they don't get major names on board, it's going to be, I mean, it's not even to reach Maxime Bernier's party. I mean, let's be frank. I mean, if we hear that, I know a lot of people, especially in conservative circles, when they hear the name Jean Charest, now they laugh because Poilievre absolutely crushed him in the leadership race. But if like a Jean Charest type that still can, have some attention in the media and have some support in some places in the country, you could maybe hope to have a handful of points. But so Canadian Avenir Canada, why don't they call it Coalition Avenir Canada and be done with it, right? It would be
maybe that's where they're going to go.
It would be the CAC Canada. Oh, it would be interesting. I find this story interesting. I'm not sure it's going to go anywhere, to be honest. But what do I know? From a numbers point of view, to have another party that is not on the fringes, because this is where usually new parties find themselves. This is a party that's trying to be more of a centrist option. I find it interesting. I don't think it will work, but it could, and I'll stand corrected if it ever has if it shows up in polls and has a bit of support.
Yeah, I think you're right. It depends on if they get any big names. I remember during the leadership race, Abacus did do a test poll. Would you vote for another party led by Jean Charest? And I think it got 9%.
Yeah, 9%.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Which would be great if this party could manage that, because when Bernier first launched his party, they got under 2% of the vote.
That's right.
And even when they were at their high water mark during the pandemic, they only got just under 5%, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with this. And to me, it feels like this is more likely to hurt the Liberals than the Conservatives.
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It could take a few points off the Conservatives, but the thing is, Poilievre right now is so popular with the Conservatives, and also the fact that if you are a Conservative voter, even though perhaps you don't like the way Poilievre is handling things, the fact that he's leading in the polls and he's probably going to, he's in good position to win the next election, you won't jump ship. There's nothing that unites people around a cause than winning. And so he hasn't won yet. I'm not saying that he will, but he's in a good position right now. If he was at 26% and his approval rating was -30, it would be a different story. But
there just doesn't seem to be a lot of orphan Conservatives right now, right?
Well, they're already gone. They're already gone.
They're with the Conservatives, or they're gone entirely. So it doesn't feel like there's as much of a window when the Conservatives are at 40%.
No,
for a centrist party, right? A PC kind of party. So we'll see.
The
Manitoba.
Canadian Future Party. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that name, but we'll see. We'll see.
Okay. Let's go to Manitoba. So there's an election happening there. It's on October 3rd, so getting down to the last couple of weeks. And we actually finally had some polls. So earlier this week we had one from Research Co., which showed a close race between the NDP and the PCs. The regional numbers were a little odd because it had a close race in the rural areas where the NDP usually trails by huge margins. But the new polls that we got just in the last couple of days were from the Angus Reid Institute and from Probe Research, which did the poll for the Winnipeg Free Press and CTV. And both of these polls show the NDP in a really, really strong position, right? They're up 9 points according to Probe. They were up, 6 points? 6 points according to Angus Reid Institute. and 20 plus points in Winnipeg. So if I see these numbers, to me, I see an NDP majority. I don't think, to me, there's not too much question about that with these numbers.
Yeah, I agree. And I will run later today. We're recording this on Thursday. I will run and update the Manitoba 338 Canada page. It will show the most likely scenario as being an NDP majority, but it's not because of the seat count and because of the vote distribution, Éric, it's not a crushing majority. It won't be like a 15 or 20 seat majority. It could be like a 5-seat majority. Because those rural seats appear to, most of them at least, appear to be rather safe for the PCs, except for the northern ones, of course. The Winnipeg, those numbers are just crushing in Winnipeg. And the Probe Research is the local Manitoba firm. And I'm really interested to see their numbers and the progression of numbers over the last few months. But we cannot discount the last election, Éric. And I told you this off air. But in the last election, I have the numbers here. The Probe Research had the PCs at 40% province-wide in their final poll of 2019. And the PCs at 47%. So that's just a 7-point miss. That's way outside the margin of error. So is it just the 20th poll out of the 20? Is it just a one-time? Because even the best pollsters sometimes have the occasional miss. Was it a miss or was it an underestimation of the Conservative vote? Because if we have just 3-4 more points for the Conservatives, suddenly they could be very competitive and could be a very close, like 28 to 30 seat finish between the Conservatives and the New Democrats. So I'm a bit nervous about this election, looking at the polls. But again, the Angus Reid Institute, which is not really known as a pro-NDP, right, has the NDP winning handily as well. So,
yeah, there is always that possibility that there'll be an underperformance and an overperformance for the PCs, underperformance for the NDP.
Yeah.
Because when you do look at the vote numbers, here, I'm just trying to pull them up here. When it comes to age, you have that the NDP is leading by 25 points among those 18 to 34, 7 points between 35 to 54, which makes this feel a little bit stronger for the NDP that they're still leading among the middle-aged. Mm-hmm. But among those over the age of 55, the PCs are ahead by 2. And I don't have the probe numbers in front of me, but it would be the same kind of thing. So there is that possibility. You'd expect the PCs are going to be able to do a little bit better and the NDP a little bit worse than where they are in the polls. But this kind of gap might be enough to cover that. My view of the 2019 campaign would be that was one that everybody kind of assumed the PCs were going to win. Yeah. The kind of progressive vote might have been a little bit less enthusiastic to bother voting. And, that could have explained some of it. But when it's a close race like this, you kind of expect the PCs will do a little bit better than this. So the margins won't be 9 to 6 points. They might be 3 to 6 points.
Yeah.
But it could still be enough. Because I think in a tie, literal tie, I think the NDP's edge in Winnipeg still gives them the advantage in the seat count. It's not as good as it used to be. Like 10 years ago, the NDP could probably win with a popular vote deficit of a couple of points. Now it seems as it gets a bit more kind of less, more the rural-urban split. I think it's not working as well as it used to for the NDP, but I still think that they could withstand the kind of turnout effects that we would expect.
I have Probe's numbers here by age. So 18 to 34. 54% NDP, 31 for the Conservatives. So that's 23 points. Among the 35 to 54, 52 NDP, 36 PC. And that hurts. That hurts for the PC. That's a 16-point gap. And 55 and older, you would expect the PCs to be doing much better, right? 44 PC, 43 NDP. So those numbers say it's game over and the NDP would win. But again, as Probe Research adjusted from 4 years ago, or was it just a fluke? It's very possible. And we see that the Manitoba Liberals, we talked about this in the last podcast we did together, won't have a full slate of candidates, so most likely they will underperform their polls.
Yeah. And the same thing for the Greens. I don't know if Angus Reid or Probe had a number for the Greens.
Yeah, 2%.
Nobody, so so they'll be lucky to even get one with the such a small slate. But yeah, the Liberal vote, you do wonder how successful they'll be in holding their 3 seats. Because Dugald, Lamont, and St. Boniface, that's not a super safe riding. It used to be Greg Sellinger's riding. So, the Liberals do have to worry about losing some of their seats. With these kinds of numbers, it gets a little bit difficult to be in the minority situation, I would think. But as we said, if the PCs overperform a little bit, the NDP underperforms a little bit, then we could be back into a 28, 26 kind of zone for the NDP and the PCs in terms of seats, and then those Liberal seats matter a lot. But we'll see what happens.
A majority, you need 29 seats to have a majority. And the thing is, if you have 30 seats, that means that everybody has to be there. The whip has a lot of whipping to do, and and you sometimes would need that vote from the Liberals to help yourself if you're the NDP. So I expect a close finish. Perhaps I'll be wrong. Perhaps we'll see a similar phenomenon that we saw in Alberta, where all the other parties, basically, it became a 2-party race, save maybe for Douglas Lamont's seats. And all the non-PC vote will go to the NDP, and Webcanoe will become the first First Nation premier in Canada, a provincial premier, of course, in Canada, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, that'll be a big landmark. And for the federal NDP, again, if it happens, for the federal NDP, a win, right? And a little bit of energy. And not a win that they can claim and the provincial party is not going to like them. Like in Alberta and Saskatchewan, I had the Alberta NDP win. I don't think you'd see Singh going to Edmonton to go celebrate. But here, there is a much closer relationship between the Manitoba and the federal NDP. The chief of staff, I believe, of Jagmeet Singh is a former Manitoba New Democrat, right? So there is those kinds of links.
Interesting.
So there is a closer link there. So that'll be something to watch, and that'll be October 3rd. So we still got another chance. Next week, I want to do something with you about trying to choose some of the closest ridings. So
all right. Excellent.
We'll do
that sounds good.
And we might get another election. I want to talk about New Brunswick just very briefly. So we got news that Blaine Higgs says he's going to stay on as premier.
Yep.
He had an announcement, which I thought was pretty funny. It was on Twitter. And if you read it, it had the cadence and the structure of a last paragraph that says, and because of this, I am going to step aside and give someone a...
Absolutely.
Didn't have that.
Yeah, that's what I was expecting. Yeah. Because I read the memo before the headlines. And so as I was reading, I was like, okay, so he's leaving. Who would be a good PC leader for the New Brunswick PCs? And then, no, I'm sticking around. So Mr. Higgs is deciding to fight. As you said, I mean, the election is scheduled for October 24. That's a year from now. What are the odds that we get an early election, a snap election?
Yeah, because we saw an article from Jacques Poitras. He said there's lots of speculation that maybe Higgs will want to go sooner. Because he does have some internal caucus dissent. His poll numbers are good enough to maybe win, but they're not terrific. His personal numbers aren't very good. Yeah. There's going to be a new electoral map that comes in, and I think if they go earlier, they can get ahead of having to use it. And so maybe there's going to be a chance of an earlier election in the fall, and that would be an interesting one. I like New Brunswick elections. Like, there's provinces to me that are less interesting, and then there's a few that are more interesting.
Which one, Eric? Which one? No, kidding. We'll talk about that later. Some of you have boring elections. I'm sorry. No, New Brunswick I like. I like New Brunswick's elections because they have the interesting linguistic divide. Yep.
The Green Party there is the third party, so that's a different kind of dynamic that is interesting. You have the People's Alliance, which used to have a bit of a role. Now it looks like it's fading away. But anyway, I find New Brunswick elections kind of interesting because it is one of those where knowing how it's going to play out in the seats really matters, because you can lose. PCs can lose popular vote by probably 6 points and still easily win, like they did in
18. It was 2018. Monsieur Galland won the popular vote by 6 points.
Yeah,
and lost by
1 seat.
Yeah. So
so if there is going to be an early election, I'm all for that. New Brunswick, I enjoy those elections. Although, we don't have a huge schedule next year either, so I wouldn't mind holding it off. But next fall is going to be busy. We've got some elections.
Next year's schedule is all 3 elections in October. So we'll have a boring year and a very busy October. So Saskatchewan, British Columbia, and New Brunswick. So perhaps they'll spread it around. But also, I wanted to add, Éric, I mean, the Liberal leader, Susan Holt, I do not know how she will perform in an election campaign, but it looks like she will be far more dynamic than Mr. Vickers last time around. Mr. Vickers, he seemed out of place, never seemed comfortable, and of course, Blaine Higgs won that election, and so I think Miss Holt will be a fiercer opponent than Mr. Vickers was 4 years ago. So
a bigger contrast for sure.
Oh, absolutely, and a woman, a younger person, as I said, more dynamic, fully bilingual, which Mr. Higgs still isn't and won't ever be, I guess. But yeah, when would you like it? When would you like the election to be? I think I would like spring, when the tulips get out, maybe in April or May, because in the winter, who wants a winter election? You don't, right?
Yeah. No, it's a nice spring election. It's nice when there's an election in the spring and some elections in the fall. So and then we organize our vacations around that. To see what we live.
That's right.
Yeah.
Do you want to go some questions, Éric?
Yeah, let's do some questions. So I'll read this one, and I think I'll give you the ball after that for the answer. So this was from Jaybird on Discord. Now, we take our questions from our Discord page and our Patreon page. Our Discord, I'm enjoying the Discord a lot.
Me too.
We've you can come there. We have some funny GIFs or GIFs. I'm not sure. I think it's GIFs, eh? And anyway, so to be a member of the Discord and the Patreon, you have to join our Patreon page at thenumberspod.ca, and you get early access to the episodes. If you're already a patron, you're listening to this on Thursday, not on Friday.
That's right.
Why do you want to listen to this on Friday? Who knows what's happened since then? So anyway, Jay Bird, he said, why do the Conservatives do well specifically in the Quebec City area and the Saguenay, but not in other regions such as the Eastern Townships and the Gaspé region, which are both pretty rural and older, good demographics for the Conservatives? Since you're a Quebec-based correspondent and you spent some time in Quebec City, there is always this thing in Quebec, right? Le mystère du Québec.
De Québec.
De Québec, that's right, yeah. Why does Quebec City vote Conservative?
Okay,
answer.
I'll be very careful here choosing my words, because I will get in trouble from the city where I grew up in. I grew up in the suburbs of Quebec City. And, years ago, not that far, I mean, when I was young, Quebec City was basically a government town. And you had two industries in Quebec. You had the government and you had tourism, right? And so, obviously in the government, there were nice union jobs, and in tourism, you get a lot of minimum wage jobs it's hard work. And of course, I'm overgeneralizing this answer, I know, but there was a lot of people that were angry at government workers for having it so easy in their minds. And of course, there is also une surenchère of talk radio that trying to outdo each other and try to be more radical and more spectacular in their comments, right? So I think if you grew up in the suburbs of Quebec City, you are a typical suburban voter in Canada, which I think usually are swing voters between Liberals and Conservatives. And that's what we see. There are some Liberals in Quebec City, but if you're elsewhere in Quebec, I think your axis has always been more federal versus sovereignty. And even though that has lingered a bit over time, it's still a big issue for many people. And so I think that's why it's more usually a battle between the Liberals and the Bloc Québécois. Quebec City has changed a lot, by the way. The economy has diversified. They have a high technology industries over there. So it has changed over time. But those roots have lingered a lot. And the local MPs in Quebec City, for many of them, are stars. They're not known nationally, they're not known provincially, but they are known in Quebec City. I mean, Gérard Deltel is very well known in Quebec City. He was a television anchor in his younger days. And so I think the Conservatives were able to recruit good local candidates.
Do you think there's anything to the idea of the Quebec-Montreal rivalry? Montreal votes progressive, votes liberal, so Quebec has to vote conservative.
Of course, but thing is, people in Quebec City will say the opposite. Will say, "Oh, Montreal, it's it's full of people who drink lattes and I mean these are of course simplifications that of the reality, and there's some of that too. At Quebec City is wall-to-wall CAQ at the provincial level, whereas there's barely no CAQ seats in Montreal. I mean, there's Pointe-aux-Trembles, but Pointe-aux-Trembles is, Repentigny West, basically.
It's suburban, yeah.
I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, I know. But that's my answer. That's my
you look
answer.
at some of the other areas, like the Gaspé is the kind of one that you kind of would expect, and maybe it could be a conservative region. But I think that area, like you said, it's an area that's more of a federalist versus sovereignist kind of debate.
Yep.
And also because of the fact that the Gaspé is not a region that has a lot of wealth and a lot of prosperity. That it probably doesn't have as a sour view of the government as much, right?
That's right.
You need to have government support for the fisheries and these kinds of things. So you wouldn't have the same small government kind of independence, right, that you might have in rural Ontario or rural Alberta, where you just want the government to get out of the way. So I think that might be a little bit of an aspect there. And then, yeah, because when the bloc went down in 2011, 2015, a lot of those ridings in rural Quebec didn't vote conservative, right? They voted for the NDP.
Yep.
And then they voted for the Liberals. So you don't have that. The Conservatives are just not seen as, I think a part of it is that they're just not seen as a very pro-Quebec party.
Yeah.
And I think that legacy, which has been there since
the merger. Yeah. Well, before
since Louis Riel.
Yeah.
I'm talking about since forever.
Yeah.
The Conservatives are always kind of seen as an English Canadian party, right? And maybe in some areas of the province, it's harder to get over that historic legacy of the Conservatives, I think.
Pierre Poilievre, with a French name, speaks well French. Yeah. His wife is francophone from Quebec. It could change things. I'm not saying it will, but there's a potential there that it was not there with Andrew Scheer or Erin O'Toole.
Yeah. Do you want to? How about you read the next question?
All right. So Kevin James on the Patreon asks us, how much of Green MP Mike Maurice, I believe it's Kitchener, right? That's
yes, Kitchener Centre.
That's right. Mike Maurice's re-election chances are based on the Green national campaign and how much on his personal record. Now, we preface this question by saying that Mr. Maurice won fair and square, but the fact there was no Liberal candidate. He was disqualified.
Yeah, he withdrew. Yeah,
he withdrew. So of course it helped the Greens hold that seat, gain that seat rather. But what do you think? Do you think that his personal campaign is more important than the national campaign?
I think in his case it will be. I think for Green MPs especially, the personal kind of campaign is more important than the national one, because I think that the biggest hurdle that Green MPs and MLAs and whatever have to get over is my vote actually going to elect anybody? Yeah. And I think once they prove that they can actually win, then they can do far better, right? And I think that's what we've seen in a lot of ridings where Green MPs or MPPs or MLAs have been elected, is that the next time they have a bit of an easier time, because that psychological barrier of am I throwing my vote away goes away. Absolutely. So I think that a lot of the vote that Morris got from the Liberals, because there was no Liberal candidate, is probably going to stick with him, a lot of it. And so I think that he does have a chance to be reelected, but he didn't win with huge margin, right? I think he had like 32% or something.
Mid-30s,
in Kitchener Centre.
Yeah.
So he is probably going to need to have more support. I don't think he can probably win again with that. So that'll be an interesting thing. The Green campaign last time was just awful. Terrible national campaign.
Yeah.
So
oh God, yeah.
Presumably they can do a little bit better this time, because otherwise they're doomed. But I would think I would give him decent chances of being reelected. I would say it's probably more than 50% if I had to give him odds.
Although you say that he has to get more than the mid-30s, I mean, if there is a Liberal candidate in that riding, and we assume there will be, I mean, that's an even more split vote. So you could win with 28% of the vote if it's a evenly split. And I know we know Kitchener voters. I mean, every party has a bit of support there, so it's not going to be a landslide either way, unless Mr. Maurice takes all his charm and goes through house to house. And so it's going to be a very interesting one. And for the Liberals, that's a net loss. The fact that, because they probably would have won that seat with their candidate, but now they lost it, and it's going to be much harder to get it back.
Okay, let's. You have something for me, a quiz again this week. We didn't do one last week, but you got one this week for me.
We quizzed our listeners, and I think the results came in that the quiz was quite popular. It's fun to put Éric on the spot, right?
Yeah. It wasn't unanimous. It wasn't unanimous. We had one dissenter who did not like the quiz that much.
All right.
But we'll go ahead anyway.
So the quiz is a bit different this time. It's a bit shorter. So what I will do is I have 3 politicians, recent politicians. I'm going to go ahead with the first one. I'm going to give you a clue. If you get it right, you get 4 points. If you don't get it right, I give you another clue for 3 points. If you get it right, you get 3 points, and so on. So 4 clues maximum per. So the maximum is 12 points. To win the quiz, you have to have a majority of the points. So that means 7 out of 12. My clue here is that these are not necessarily active politicians, all of them, but they are recent politicians. I'm not taking some obscure social credit from the 20s or something. Okay. So, are you ready, my friend?
Sure.
I think, well, which one should I start? Okay, I'll start with this one. So, first clue, first politician for 4 points. As a young man, this former politician always had politics in his blood, as he became president of the youth wing of the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario in the late 1980s. He was first elected in the Ottawa area riding of Nepean in the 1995 Ontario general election. At the time, he was the youngest member of the legislature at Queen's Park. Do you know who that is? You can have one guess. You can have one guess for free, of course. Not more than one guess for free, but per clue.
Okay. I feel like I know who this is, but I can't think of it. Nepean. And I'm sure if you're an Ontario PCer, you're like, it's of course this guy. Oh boy. Youth wing of the party, Nepean. John Baird.
And you get 4 points, my friend. It is John Baird.
Yes.
Wow. Oh my God. Okay. And I didn't see your hands moving, so you did not Google it or Wikipedia it. So, all right. Well, the thing is, I guess my last 3 clues will go in the wastebasket because you got it, John Baird. So 4 points.
What were the other ones? Let's just go through them quickly.
Second clue was he was re-elected in the 1999 Ontario general election, then joined the Mike Harris cabinet as the Ministry of Community and Social Service. After Mike Harris resigned, Ernie Eves became Ontario Premier. He was promoted as Minister of Energy, where he was entrusted with selling off part of Hydro One. That's the second.
I don't think
clue.
This would have helped me. I don't think that would have helped me.
What
would have been the next one?
The third clue was, although he was easily re-elected in the 2003 Ontario election, this politician left Queen's Park to run for the federal Conservatives in the 2006 election, and he won in the federal riding of Ottawa West Nepean.
I would have got it there at least.
You would have got it there, yeah? A seat he would hold until his resignation. And he was appointed president of the Treasury Board by Stephen Harper, and he also became environment minister, although he had been a vocal opponent of the Kyoto Agreement. And the fourth clue was this politician resigned in 2015, shortly before the Harper government was defeated. He endorsed Pierre Poilievre in a 2022 CPC leadership campaign.
Okay.
But
right.
you get
I'm
the
off to a good
full...
start.
You have to... I think that was... Yeah, oh my God. Good for you. Okay. Second politician. This sitting federal politician grew up in Montreal. She is the daughter of parents who have been notably involved in politics. Her father, an accountant, was president of the Liberal Party Finance Committee in Quebec. Her stepmother was an MP who represented Laval Est from 2000 to 2004.
Okay.
That's for 4 points.
Oh boy, yeah, this one seems a bit tougher. Okay, so current Liberal, Montreal,
And she, female.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll just say Mélanie Joly.
And that's the correct answer. There you go. You won the quiz. 8
That was
points.
it. I guessed. I just said woman from Montreal is a Liberal. I guess I'm just like in that poll that was the only people could think of. Okay.
Well,
Hey, I'm good. Well, that was just a guess.
Well, it's still. I think you would have had this one anyway, but maybe not on the first clue. I thought, I give you what the parents did. Okay, well, I'll just
know that though. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
I'll read the other clues just for fun. So her first stint in politics was at the municipal level, where she founded her own party and obtained a surprising 26% of the vote in a 2013 Montreal municipal election, an election that was won by Denis Coderre. You would have gotten there, I think.
Yeah.
And in case you didn't, my third clue was she was elected at the House of Commons in 2015 in the Ahuntsic-Cartierville riding and was appointed to the first Justin Trudeau cabinet as Minister of Canadian Heritage. In 2018, she became Minister of Tourism and Official Languages. And at this point, if you still didn't have it, I would really judge you. My fourth clue was...
that would be...
My fourth clue was she currently serves as Minister of Foreign Affairs. So...
Well, apparently only 15% of Canadians could have got that. So there you go.
Okay, so you already won the quiz, but if you want to go for the perfect score,
12 for 12. Let's do it.
All right. Okay. This former politician became member of the federal NDP at age 19 when he was studying law at McGill University in the 70s. At McGill, he was elected president of the McGill Law Students Association and sat on the council of the McGill Student Union. His first stint in active politics began in the 1994 Quebec election, where he was elected under the Quebec Liberal banner.
Oh, okay. See, I was thinking like Brian Topp. Former
the first clue the first part of the first clue would point to that, but
okay, Quebec Liberal in 1994, former Dipper. I got no Tom Mulcair.
Oh my God, you got it. Oh my! It was too easy, I guess. Oh my God! A perfect score for Éric on the quiz this week. I couldn't.
You know what's actually really funny? I was sure it wasn't Tom Mulcair because I was like, he was never part of the NDP before he joined the NDP, and apparently he was. Yeah. So we're learning
so much. I'll still go through the clues just for fun.
Sure.
Because you really cut the quiz short this week. All right.
Yeah.
His riding was the very safe Liberal seat of Chaumédé in Laval, where Jean Charest defeated the Parti québécois and took the Quebec Liberals to power in the 2003 general election. This politician was named Minister of Sustainable Development, Environment and Parks. In 2006, Jean Charest allegedly demoted this politician over disagreement on the development of a ski resort in the Mont Orford National Park. After leaving politics, this politician went on to federal politics.
Yeah, I would have totally got it there. That's for sure.
Exactly.
See, the first one was just a guess. I was just, again, picking out of a hat. So I don't know if I get full marks for this, but...
The fourth clue was this politician ran for the federal NDP leadership after Jack Layton's passing in 11-1. So, I mean, you would have gotten it, but you needed the points. And now 12 out of 12. So, I mean, the next few quizzes... You have to get a perfect score, otherwise it's a downhill slope.
No, I'm banking these going forward. We're going to keep track over the course of the podcast and see if I get 50%.
Wow, I'm impressed.
Okay.
I thought you would
too, but I was guessing.
I thought you would win. I checked the points that you could get. I thought you would win, but I did not expect a perfect score. Bravo, Éric. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I'm two were guesses. One was an actual informed guess. The other two were like, these are people who mildly fit these descriptions. Anyway, I'll take it. Okay, number of the week. Why don't you go? I gotta go.
I'm choosing 125. The reason I'm choosing this number is we had the first report of a redistricting map for Quebec provincial districts. And the question now is whether Quebec will retain all 125 ridings. There are some rumors, I'm not sure how founded they are, that we could increase the number of MNAs in Quebec because some regions, such as La Gaspésie, would be losing a seat because their ridings are not populated enough. And so the only way to mend that bridge would be to increase the number of MNAs, but I'm not sure the CAQ has appetite for that. So 125. Will we get more than 125 MNAs in the next Quebec election? I'll be following that file very closely over the coming months.
How long? I don't know if you know this. How long has it been 125? I was trying to look it up.
I believe the 94 election, Jacques Parizeau, I believe that was 125, but before that it was lower. So it's been like almost 30 years. Or 30 years, yeah.
So it's not written in stone, so we'll see.
No.
All right. Here's my number. So my number is 81.
Okay. 81.
This was the share of Canadians who say they're not attached to the monarchy in a Léger poll. The poll found that 63% of Canadians, including 78% of Quebecers, think it is time to reconsider ties to the monarchy. I don't think this is a monarchist podcast. I have a notion we might both be Republicans on this, but I think it's interesting that it is almost a unanimous opinion, and yet nothing's going to happen because no one cares enough.
Well, the process to remove the monarchy is a arduous and long and possibly painful one. You would need all provinces to agree. It's not 7 out of 10 on this one. You would need all provinces to agree on this, and the federal, and the Senate, and there's so many steps to remove the monarchy in Canada. And then what do you replace it with? So I mean, I think we agree that the monarchy is a joke, but it's like better than other alternatives. I don't know, but I think we agree that it's to swear allegiance to the King of England in this day and age is, well, I'm going to be polite and say it's kind of dated.
Yeah, just a tad. Anyway, if you're a monarchist, you can write to us and tell us that we're wrong and God save the king and all that kind of thing.
But register first, become a patron first, so you can tell us in our podcast.
Yeah, we will only take abuse if you also send us some money. I think that's fair. And if you want to do that, if you want to send us your abuse and or love, you can get early access to every episode of The Numbers and participate in our Discord, where we are chatting about politics, mostly joking about politics. But we also get questions for our weekly mailbag. You can become a patron at our Patreon site, and you can find that at thenumberspod.ca. So go there and do it. And if you've already done it and you're listening to this on Thursday like a winner, then thank you so much, and we'll be back for another episode next week. So thanks very much, Philippe, and I hope you have a good weekend, and we'll chat again next week.
Next quiz, you won't get it perfectly, I can tell you that. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you very much. Talk to you soon.